Hi, today we're going to talk about what is RTI and what does it look like at RPS. RTI stands for Response to Intervention, and basically it's a fancy way to say that we want to make sure that we're meeting students where they are. It's all about the early identification of students that may need extra support in learning or with their behavioral needs. This also helps us with the over-identification of students to special education. So there's 3 tiers in the RTI framework. The first tier, the second tier, and the third tier are all listed here on the screen. But it is really important to take a note and look at what happens here below. And it's also very important to note that a true MTSS framework includes multiple tiers in a system of support. So if you're getting tier 1, if you're getting tier 2, you're also getting tier 1. If you're getting tier 3, you're also getting tier 2, and you're also getting tier 1. And if you make it all the way through the tiers and you're still not making adequate progress, then it may be time to take a look at what we're doing and see if child find would be necessary. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about what these 3 tiers look like within RPS. First, we've got tier 1, which is the general education classroom. This involves screening students, core curriculum and programs that students are enrolled in at the middle school and high school level. And then of course, in elementary, we're thinking about L and Eureka. So this phase of RTI is where the teacher is monitoring. You can see some of the core instruction and team responsibilities also listed on this chart. And I'll make sure that I drop a link so that you have access to this as well after the video is over. So again, tier 1 is what everyone is getting within their classroom. So if a teacher is noticing that this isn't quite enough, what we would do is move on to tier 2. This is a very strategic intervention that's also managed by the classroom teacher, but in addition, the assistant principal, also known as the SBIT or school-based intervention team chair, would be monitoring and coming back to revisiting and having conversations to make sure that modifications and accommodations don't need to be made to the tier 2 intervention that the classroom teacher is providing, or that we don't need to go a step further and perhaps move on to referring a student to what's called tier 3, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But again, tier 2 is happening in addition to tier 1 core instruction. And this may look like students that are struggling to get what they need from tier 1. And so here we would definitely want to notify families. We would pool them into a small group or even one-on-one instruction, and they would get differentiated support or remediation to meet their needs and to meet them where they are. But it's very important to note that tier 2 is on grade level remediation on all those prerequisite skills, and it's in class, okay? Again, you can read this chart to go more in depth. So if we notice that the student is stagnant or maybe not making progress at the rate at which we would hope, then we would fill out what's called an SOC form, or a student of concern. This form would then go to your assistant principal, and a team known as SBIT would sit down to discuss next steps, which could include A, revising current tier 2 strategic intervention, or B, creating a student intervention plan and hopping into tier 3, which is known as intensive intervention. This is for chronically struggling students that are 2 or more grade levels below. And this is, again, based on Universal Screener and other data measures. I will also include a link at the bottom of the video that has some really helpful data artifacts that you can include on your student of concern form that will help your SBIT team make an informed decision on next steps. If a student is getting tier 3, typically it's by an interventionist, whether that be behavior, reading, or math. For reading this year, RPS is an all hands on deck model. So you'll also see classroom teachers as well as tutors providing tier 3 intensive intervention. But this is progress monitored and tracked monthly with a school-based intervention team to make sure that students are mastering these foundational skills. And it should be noted that a student receiving tier 3 intensive intervention is working on foundational concepts to grow their fluency in reading or math or behavior. And so these are not grade level standards that are being taught. If the student is still stagnant, regressing, or perhaps not making progress and growth at a rate at which we would expect, then we would stop again, talk with our SBIT, and possibly consider that student for the child find process. Here's a great graphic that kind of puts it all together for us.